Stop for an instant. Take a deep breath. Now imagine that someone shows you an infinite sequence of numbers, not dozens, not hundreds, but infinite digits. They appear one after the other, without pattern, without repetition, without end. Most people look away in a few seconds. The brain goes into exhaustion. The mind rejects that as useless. But now imagine something disturbing. What if someone looked at that sequence down and did not see numbers? What if that person saw places, faces, objects, stories? What if, instead of chaos, they saw order? There is a number that challenges everything the human brain likes. It does not end. It does not repeat. It does not explain itself easily. This number is known as Euler's number. It governs invisible phenomena, growth, decay, time, change. But today, what it does not matter. What matters is what it represents. An infinite sequence that theoretically no one should be able to memorize, and even so, someone memorized it, thousands of digits, by heart, without cheating, without magic tricks. The question that arises is not, how is this possible? The real question is, what else could you remember if you had never been taught to forget? Since childhood, you learn to accept a silent idea. My memory is weak. I'm not good at memorizing. This is not for me. But what if that was never true? What if the problem were not your memory, but the mental model you received about it? Human memory was not made for numbers, nor for lists, nor for long texts. It was made for survival. It evolved to remember safe paths, familiar faces, threats, shelters, stories. For hundreds of thousands of years, no one needed to memorize formulas, but everyone needed to remember where the danger was. And that is why memory works the way it works. When you receive information now at this exact moment, it does not enter your head as a word. It enters as energy. Sound waves hit your ears. These waves are converted into electrical impulses. These impulses travel through billions of neurons. Each neuron is a crossroads. Each synapse is a choice. If the information does not find connections, it simply dies. The brain does not store everything. It selects. At the center of this process, there is a tiny and powerful structure, the hippocampus. It is the gatekeeper of memory. Everything passes through it, but almost nothing stays. If the hippocampus decides that something is not relevant, that disappears in minutes. And here is an uncomfortable truth. Most of what you study, read, or watch, your brain considers irrelevant, not out of malice, but out of economy. That is why you forget names seconds after hearing them. That is why you read an entire page and realize you remember nothing. It is not laziness. It is not stupidity. It is normal functioning. Short-term memory is brutally limited. It can keep a few pieces of information active for a few seconds, maybe minutes. It is like trying to hold water with your hands. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is selective. It does not want quantity. It wants meaning. It stores what connects with something that already exists. And here something happens that almost no one notices. Memory is not storage. Memory is association. If you do not associate, you do not remember. Now think about your own life. You probably do not remember what you ate 3 days ago, but you remember an embarrassment from 10 years ago. Why? Because emotion creates neural anchoring. Shame, fear, surprise, intense joy. All of this tells the brain, this is important. Store it. But there is a dangerous side effect. The brain does not record reality. It records a functional version of reality. When you remember something, you do not access the past. You reconstruct. Every memory is a mixture of fact, with interpretation, with emotion, with expectation. That is why two people can live the same event and remember completely different things. This constant reconstruction is what allows creativity, but it also allows error. It allows false memories. It allows distortions. It allows absolute certainties based on nothing. The brain prefers a good story to an incomplete truth. And now we reach a crucial point. If memory is so flawed, if it distorts, if it invents, how does someone manage to control this process consciously? How does someone manage to transform the chaos of the mind into a reliable system? The answer lies in a simple but powerful shift. Stop fighting the brain and start working with it. And that is exactly what we are going to do from here. In part 2, you will understand why your memory fails even when you make an effort, How individual and collective false memories arise. What really happens in déjà vu. Why trusting your own memory too much can be dangerous. There is something deeply unsettling about human memory. It does not fail like a broken machine. It fails with conviction. When you remember something, you are sure that it happened exactly that way. The emotion is there. The image seems clear. The confidence is total. And even so, it can be completely false. Most people believe that forgetting is the biggest problem of memory, but science shows something much more disturbing. The real danger of memory is not forgetting. It is remembering things that never happened. Every time you access a memory, something invisible happens. The memory does not come out intact from the file. It enters an unstable state, malleable, vulnerable. At that moment, new information can mix with the old memory. And when you save that memory again, it is no longer the same. It is a copy of the copy, altered, reinterpreted. Now think about this applied to your entire life. How many times have you told a story from your past? How many times have you heard someone tell the same story to you? Each repetition is an edit. The brain does not perceive this as an error. It perceives it as narrative coherence. That is why eyewitness testimonies are so fragile. That is why innocent people are convicted. That is why shared memories can become mental epidemics. One of the most intriguing phenomena linked to this became known as the Mandela effect. The term was popularized by researcher Fiona Broome when she noticed that thousands of people believed that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s. Vivid details, imagined speeches, funeral ceremonies that never existed. And yet, Mandela was alive. This was not an isolated case. Millions of people remember details that simply do not exist. Cartoon characters with wrong clothes, logos with non-existent symbols, movie scenes that were never filmed. These memories do not arise from nothing. They are born from plausible associations. The brain completes patterns. It hates gaps. But why do so many people share the same error? Because we are social creatures. Belonging to a group is more important to the brain than being right. If many people say they remember the same thing, the brain concludes that it must be true, even when it is not. Now imagine the impact of this on learning. If memory can be so easily distorted, how can you trust it to learn something complex? The answer is paradoxical. You do not trust memory. You train it. Before that, we need to understand another strange phenomenon, déjà vu. That disconcerting sensation that the present moment has already been lived. You enter a place, you hear a sentence, and something inside you says, "This already happened." But it did not happen. What neuroscience suggests is that sometimes a small synchronization error occurs between regions of the brain. The information reaches the memory system, but is registered as a memory before being fully lived. The brain interprets the present as the past. It is not prediction. It is not vision. It is a temporal stamp error. There is also the opposite, jamais vu. When something extremely familiar becomes strange, you repeat a word several times, and suddenly it loses meaning. The brain temporarily deactivates semantic association. The word becomes just sound. This shows something crucial. Meaning is not in things. It is in connections. Memory does not fail at random. It follows rules, and whoever understands these rules can exploit them. There are neurological conditions that selectively affect different types of memory. The most well-known is Alzheimer's disease. It mainly affects the hippocampus, the guardian of memory. First, recent memories are lost. Then old memories. Finally, even motor skills disappear. The body forgets how to move. Other conditions affect short-term memory. ADHD, for example, makes it difficult to maintain attention. The information enters, but does not remain long enough to be consolidated. It is not lack of intelligence, it is failure of retention. All of this reinforces an essential truth. Memory is not unique. It is composed of different systems, and you can have difficulty in one and excellence in another. Now think about this carefully. If memory is malleable, if it can be trained, if it responds to emotion, image, and association, why do we insist on trying to learn everything in the worst possible way? Since school, we were trained to memorize pure abstractions, dates without context, numbers without image, concepts without story. The brain hates this. It cooperates out of obligation, but not out of efficiency. And now comes the silent revelation. People who seem to have prodigious memory do not use ordinary memory. They translate everything. They transform the abstract into concrete, the invisible into image, the number into scene. There is an ancient idea, almost forgotten, that crossed centuries. It was born long before notebooks, books, or screens, even before writing became common. Orators of ancient Greece needed to give speeches for hours without missing a single word. They had no teleprompter, they had no paper, they had only the mind. And that is how one of the most powerful techniques ever created emerged, the memory palace. The idea is simple, but deeply counterintuitive. Instead of trying to store information in the head, you spread this information in space. Not in real physical space, but in a mental space that you know intimately. Your house, your school, the path to work, the street where you grew up. These places are already recorded in your brain with extreme precision. You do not forget where the bathroom is in your house. You do not forget the path to the kitchen in the dark. This mental map is solid, and that is exactly why it works as a structure. Now imagine the following. You do not try to memorize a list. You walk through it. Each piece of information is placed at a specific point in your palace. But here is the golden rule, the most important of all. Nothing can be normal. The brain ignores the ordinary. It discards the predictable. For a memory to stick, it needs to be strange, exaggerated, almost absurd. A bull sitting on the sofa, a hallway covered with broken eggs, a doorknob made of soft pasta, a room flooded with soda. These images do not make sense, and exactly because of that, they work. The brain was not made to forget strange things, it was made to react to them. And here something powerful happens. When you mentally walk through this space, the images appear by themselves. You do not force the memory. It comes to you. Memory stops being effort and becomes a path. But what when the challenge is not objects or words, but numbers? Numbers are the greatest enemy of natural memory. They have no smell, they have no color, they have no emotion. For the brain, numbers are noise. The solution was to create a translation. This translation became known as the major system, a simple table, but extremely effective. Each numerical digit is associated with a consonant sound. 0 becomes the sound of S or Z, 1 becomes T or D, 2 becomes N, 3 becomes M, 4 becomes R, 5 becomes L, 6 becomes J or CH, 7 becomes K or G, 8 becomes F or V, 9 becomes P or B. Vowels do not matter. They only connect the sounds. With this, numbers stop being numbers. They become words. Words become images. Images become stories. The number 31 can become motorcycle. 92 can become piano. And suddenly, an impossible sequence begins to make sense. Now imagine applying this to thousands of digits. You do not try to remember the entire sequence. You divide, you group, you transform. Each block becomes a scene. Each scene becomes a point in your mental palace. And thus, step by step, the infinite becomes navigable. It is important to say something with total honesty. This is not fast. It is not magic. It is not instant. Memorizing thousands of numbers can take months, sometimes years. But here is the truth that almost no one realizes. It is not about the final result. It is about what happens to your brain during the process. These techniques do something deep. They train your attention, your capacity for visualization, your creativity, your mental discipline. You begin to notice patterns more easily. You learn faster. You forget less. Even when you are not consciously using the method, it is like running on a treadmill. It does not take you anywhere, but it completely transforms your body. Memorizing everything does not mean remembering everything forever. It means choosing what deserves to be remembered. The brain will always forget something, and that is good. The danger is not in forgetting, it is in forgetting without realizing it. When you understand how memory works, you stop being its victim. You become an architect, architecting images, stories, mental paths. You started by looking at an infinite number, something that seemed impossible to dominate. And you ended by understanding that the true infinite is not in numbers, it is in the human capacity to imagine. So here is the final question, the most important of all. If you could memorize anything, what would you choose to never forget? Maybe a piece of knowledge, maybe a moment, maybe who you really are. Think about it, because from now on, forgetting is no longer an excuse, and remembering becomes a choice.